We're about to have a presentation from Adobe about InDesign. And despite being a recovering, once upon a time, Adobe employee, that's not why I'm here. I'm here in the capacity of representing the International Digital Publishing Forum, the IDPF, the Trade and Standards Organization for Digital Publishing that brings you the ePub format and that produces the Digital Book Conference that's been going on yesterday and today here in Javits Center, down in the bowels of eHall. And for any of you who attended that conference, thank you very much, and we appreciate your support. And we're here to push forward the ePub standard and HTML5 and the open web platform for publishing. And we also helped innovate in creating the what's now the digital discovery zone, way back when. And so we've been asked by our good partners at Reed Expositions to present an award for innovation. The IDPF Innovation Award goes to the company that's here in the digital discovery zone that our judges have determined is the most innovative solution. That's a huge challenge to determine because there are so many innovative companies in the ever-expanding digital zone. The day may come when the digital zone at Book Expo America is just Book Expo America. But that makes it increasingly difficult for our panel of judges to decide. And in fact, last year, when we announced finalists and also announced our judges, let's just say there was some arm twisting going on, and our judges this year have requested anonymity. So unfortunately, I'm their front man here to present the results single-handed to protect the guilty. So without further ado, this year's IDPF Award for Innovation in Publishing goes to Fast Pencil, a division of Courier Corporation, and Steve Wilson, their CEO, is here to accept the award on behalf of Fast Pencil. And we don't have time for a detailed presentation. Thank you very much. Anyone want to take a picture? Thanks. But our judges particularly welcomed that as Fast Pencil has evolved over a number of years, they're not a newcomer by any means. They've continued to innovate and enhance and be agile, and recently have added support for all types of content being made into books on the Fast Pencil platform. Even Evernote notes can now be turned into a book. So I won't say that I voted for them because I can't even say whether I voted for them, but I won't say that I voted for them because that might give me some hope of someday being a book author, but really they're really reaching out to enable all kinds of people to be authors and all kinds of content to get out in book form, which I think is super cool. So congratulations, and thanks for bearing with us while we did this little award thing for you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, appreciate it. Here's your and it includes the prize includes a free membership in IDPF for the year. Maybe second prize would be 2 years of membership because our organization depends on volunteers to contribute. You didn't hear that you had to actually work for it, but anyway, thanks very much. Now I'm going to turn it over to our actual scheduled and featured speaker for today. Let's see, can I open this up and actually get you going here? Okay, you can. I'm very delighted to introduce Chris Kitchener from Adobe.
Look at that, the formal introduction. Well, technically, apparently, I'm not supposed to start for another 10 minutes, but when Bill McCoy invites you on stage and asks you to start, apparently I'm starting. I'm quite jealous. When he said that the prize also includes, I thought he was going to talk about the cardboard box that it came with as well. So my name is Chris Kitchener. I'm a product manager at Adobe, and I'm very proud to work on the InDesign team. Over the last actually too many years that I care to mention, I've been working with the InDesign engineering team, and we've been working on a number of areas to help book publishers, both print book publishers and also digital book publishers. So what I wanted to do was to spend about 10 or 15 minutes this evening, or this afternoon technically, I've been in some odd time zones recently, talking a little bit about InDesign's capabilities for creating ePub. And rather than just sort of describing the features that we have inside InDesign, and I'll do a little bit of that, I also wanted to explain a little bit about the thinking behind the features and the thinking about how we believe people might wish to use InDesign to create their digital content. So I want to start by talking a little bit about the history of InDesign, not so much because being old is a good thing, as my wife continues to tell me, but more because it talks about the experience that we have and the revolutions that we've been a part of over many years. The first version of InDesign started in 1999, and that was a time around PageMaker where really the desktop publishing revolution was really taking hold. PageMaker and Quark Express were the dominant platforms, and to some degree, people thought it couldn't get better than that. InDesign arrived, and anyone here used InDesign or knows someone who used InDesign in those days? Yeah, I'm really sorry, 1.0. Well, it was a 1.0 product, people talk about that. But we very quickly picked ourselves up and started to drive the innovation that you've seen over many years inside InDesign. InDesign 2.0, which is when I started, is this a John Woo film? I'm never going to complain if I've got more people coming to watch me present, so there you go. InDesign 2.0, which is when I joined the company, when we introduced tables for the first time. Can you imagine a world when you didn't have tables inside your page layout application? We also, by the way, introduced the drop shadow. Again, I'd like to apologize for the introduction of the drop shadow to the design world. But what it really reflects is that over a number of releases, it was really bringing the convenience and the reliability of print to our customers. That's continued for many years, and as we started to get into the world of CS4 and CS5 back in 2008 and 2010, the first things people started talking about digital started to rear its ugly head. And in fact, it was back in InDesign CS3 that we introduced our first ePub export. But the purpose of me showing you this is really to talk about the fact that when InDesign talks about publishing, we have many years of understanding the kinds of processes that designers need to get involved in and production people need to get involved in to create a product that can be reliably printed, can be reliably exported, and reliably sold. Focusing more on ePub, this has been a very interesting evolution of InDesign, particularly for me as I've been around for so many years around InDesign. I don't know whether any of you remember this, but InDesign CS3 introduced the first ePub export feature from InDesign. And in those days, ePub was this crazy new thing. And in fact, if I remember rightly, it wasn't even called ePub. It was called InDesign Export 4, and I think we used some weird term like digital book in inverted commas. It was actually an ad hoc script that was placed inside InDesign. And for CS4 and CS5, it lived there and not much more happened to it. And it was only really with the introduction of InDesign CS 5.5 back in 2011 that we really started to take ePub seriously. And I have a lot of people ask me, why is it that ePub is something that you're putting so much focus on? And I think it's a natural evolution from the slide you saw previously that said InDesign has two key components. The first component is as an authoring platform for creating the most beautiful designs. The second part of that is the ability to take those beautiful designs and export them in many different formats. For print, PDF, and then a variety of other formats. And our ability to support ePub is a natural extension of that and continues to grow stronger. And then between InDesign CS6 and CC, we continue to add more and more support, in this case for reflowable ePubs. So one of the things that people often talk to me about, and I am involved in many discussions as part of the IDPF, Adobe is a very proud member of the IDPF. One of the many discussions we have is, well, when should I use InDesign? And actually people get a little bit nervous and they sort of start to say, well, you really shouldn't use a desktop application to go create that kind of thing. We love choice. We really love choice. In fact, all the choice inside our product and how you want to export content demonstrates how much we love choice. But it's easy to say that there are certain things that InDesign does very well and certain things that other workflows do very well. So here's a simple statement. If you create beautiful designs and you have an InDesign document, it's probably a reasonable place to start to say you might want to create ePub out of InDesign. And I say that opposed to the idea that if you have a honking great XML repository, then frankly, I can't think of a good reason why you'd come into InDesign to then go make an ePub. Horses for courses, and we're very, very happy with that. But the bit that I think is really important to me is the beautiful graphic design, the beautiful designs, and our ability to help you translate those designs into a variety of digital formats. So in a second, I'm going to talk just a little bit about those core capabilities, mostly because I want to talk about some of the ideas that drive those capabilities. But before I do that, I've often found that people find it useful to hear what in a product manager's mind, I'm one of the people that decides what goes into the product, what is it that drives us when we think about the features we're going to put inside InDesign? And there are three simple principles which we evolved a number of years ago, which have actually served us extremely well, and talk about what's behind the improvements we make in our InDesign ePub exports. So the first thing goes back to the previous slide again. We want to enable people to create the most beautiful ePubs possible out of our product. Now, we know that there are lots of text-heavy documents, and the notion of making some of those beautiful, there's a limit to what you can do. But we believe that we want to take that limit and we want to push it as much as we can. The second thing we want to do, and this is an eternally tricky one, is make it easy to create ePub from InDesign. Now, how many people here are coders? A couple of coders. How many people here are layout artists? Okay, hug. Coders and designers should hug now. I enjoy saying that, just because I want to bring people together. Okay, it's difficult to make an ePub, and we recognize there are many controls that people who create ePub might wish to use, but one of the things we've really tried to do in InDesign is to say, let's take a complicated process and let's try and make it easy as possible. And I'll talk about some of those capabilities that we've introduced to do just that. But that continues to be a goal of ours. Can we make it easy? Can we make it simple? The last one was driven by someone familiar to many in the ePub community, Liz Castro. And a number of years ago, she did what we declare in the company and the team now as a seminal blog post, which I think was entitled, "The 20 Reasons Why I Crack an ePub File After I've Exported It from InDesign." And it struck us that was the sort of thing that we could address and we could do better. Can we remove or reduce the number of reasons why you would crack open an ePub that you've exported from InDesign? And these three ideas, these three things that drive us, actually drive the kinds of features we build in InDesign. So what are those capabilities? What is it that you can do inside InDesign, and what are some of the things we've introduced to make that process even easier? So the first important one to talk about is the fact that we have support for reflowable ePub 2 and ePub 3. At this point, InDesign is a reflowable ePub creation tool. And actually we do, what's very important to us is that this is a standard, so therefore we make sure our ePub export conforms to the standard, and we want to make it simple. It's just a drop-down choice whether you want ePub 2 or ePub 3. The next thing is, and I'm going to slow down a little bit on this because I think this is one of the more important features or pieces of InDesign's capability, is we want to give our designers easy control over the content and the order of the ePub. And actually, this is probably one of the trickiest things about making an ePub from InDesign. Most people start with beautiful layouts, beautiful spreads where there are lots of images and there are lots of text, and the design is all about context. This image needs to be next to this text, which is above this image, which is above this text. And so the trickiest, in my mind, process of initially understanding what it means to convert an InDesign document to ePub is to actually be able to convert the beautiful design and the context of that beautiful design to a reflowable ePub, which in a sense is effectively a list of content which is shown one after the other. So in this case, we introduced a feature back in InDesign CS 5.5 called the Articles panel. And what the Articles panel enables you to do is to decide which of the content you have on your page you wish to include in the ePub. So for example, page numbers, page furniture, many other design elements that you wouldn't necessarily need in the ePub, you can declare in the Articles panel which bits do you want to appear in your ePub and which bits don't you want to appear in your ePub? And you do this by adding content to the articles panel. And so the articles panel not only declares what bits of your document you want to go into the ePub, but it also enables you to provide an order for that content, which is in effect what you're really doing. It's you're declaring what HTML do you want created and in what order do you want the content to appear. We also have additional functionality, for example, the ability to use anchored objects. So if you want to insert images within a text flow, within an InDesign story, we have capabilities to do that as well. This really touches upon the sense of creating something simple for graphic designers as an ability to then make that conversion and make that mental leap into creating a reflowable ePub. The next very important feature area, and these are the kinds of areas which we continue to strengthen over the multiple releases we've had, is the ability to transform your print content that started with print in mind in most cases to the world of ePub. And we have a number of features, and I've just picked two here today that I think are interesting. The first one being the ability to map styles, print styles, to their ePub or HTML equivalents. So for example, you may declare that you have 5 different variations on a headline style inside InDesign, which is highly appropriate for print. These are all subtle variations for different reasons. However, when you go to an ePub, you may wish to go to a particular class called headline that you have defined. So while you might have multiple different definitions of a print style, you can map all of those definitions to a specific class or a specific tag. It's this simple process of mapping the print equivalent to whatever you would wish to be in the HTML, or in this case, ePub equivalent. Another feature we developed was one based on actually some very specific feedback from one of our pre-release testers, who talked about the fact that they had a house CSS style, and they would develop that CSS style and they would use it every time. And so what they wanted to do was to be able to simply include that CSS, and therefore, when you go back to the first one, printing styles to ePub equivalent, you could describe and you could point to that CSS. So what we're really offering is a wide gamut of controls. For the designer who wants to make their first simple ePub, we can actually say, look, we'll take care and we'll try and keep as much visual fidelity as we can when we go from the print to the ePub version. However, for the more sophisticated, you can even get to the level where you say, well, look, you can bring in your own external CSS, and we will map to that CSS and enable you to make transformations. The next one is very important when it comes to the idea about mapping InDesign to the equivalent HTML. And I hear a lot of people talk about the fact that HTML first is a fabulous workflow. And indeed, in many cases, HTML first can be very, very powerful. However, on the flip side of the coin, actually going from a page layout application can also be very powerful. And the reason why I say that is because page layout applications like InDesign have many design constructs that are there to make it easier for the designer. So let's just take 2 of these examples. The first one is the concept of nested styles. Nested styles are originally a print-based feature in InDesign that allows you to construct on the fly a style which you can apply either to a word or a paragraph or a number of lines. So for example, you could construct a style that says, when I apply this style, I want the first characters to be this, the next 10 characters to be this, and then the next 10 characters to be that. So for example, in catalogs, that's a very common thing where people say, I want to apply styling based on the number of characters. This is an extremely useful efficiency feature inside InDesign, but of course, when you then try to map that to HTML, that could be very tricky. That's an important area where we can take the load on that. We can say, look, we know how we've created these styles. We can, without you having to do anything, there is no export controls, but we will say we will accurately map these kinds of constructs to HTML. Again, going back to the idea of creating visual fidelity from your original layout where possible in the ePub. A second example is InDesign's bullets and numbering. A very sophisticated set of controls to set up bullets and numbers within your InDesign document. And as it turns out, as it were, and I have to be very careful here, I was going to say more sophisticated than that which you could declare in HTML. It's not quite true. There's just more flexibility inside InDesign. And one of the challenges we found in our earlier implementation was when we then mapped that, there were things you could set up in InDesign which didn't work very well in HTML. So we went away, and in this particular case, and this was an improvement we made in January of this year, I believe, we changed the algorithm to better understand how you'd created those bullets and numbers in InDesign, and then wrote the correct markup to actually properly display that inside your ePub. So lots of below the covers work to try and make it as simple and as seamless as possible to take your visual graphic design and turn that into an ePub. The next thing is an area where we are spending a little bit of time right now actually thinking about this and focusing on it. The first one is the ability to apply metadata, and we understand that while some simple metadata controls we've already applied, in the future we wish to give you more control over metadata. But perhaps more importantly to us, and this is something that we care actually very passionately about on the team, is the ability to improve our accessibility. And in fact, we did a number of improvements in InDesign CS 5.5 to improve the accessibility of PDF documents. We wish to do the same inside ePub. At the moment, we have a good basis for this. For example, in this case, you see a little image which shows the ability to create alt text inside InDesign on images, and that is, of course, correctly passed through for the ePub and for HTML. This is an area we want to continue working on as well, and so there are some things in the pipeline right now to improve on that as well. The last thing, which again is very familiar to graphic artists, is production tools. I often talk to people about InDesign's ePub capabilities. First of all, there is the initial capability. Can I make an ePub? And then when you've managed to achieve that capability, you can say, what kind of production tools can I apply? So for example, InDesign has a live pre-flight. You can go and set up some simple profiles to actually detect errors before you go to export. We have things like object styles where you can quickly apply and manage object export settings across an entire document. These are the kind of production tools that we think really make the difference between creating one ePub in 10 days or 10 ePubs in 1 day. So I've skipped across those capabilities, and really what my goal was today wasn't specifically to say these are all the ePub features, because actually there are a lot more than I've discussed, but I wanted to give you a sense of some of the things we think about when we develop these features and some of the goals we have in our mind. But how can you learn more about InDesign's ePub export capabilities? My colleague, a gentleman by the name of Douglas Waterfall, an extremely talented engineer and someone who has been responsible for building many of the tables features in InDesign and many of the type and composition features, he has been working on our ePub features and driving those features. And if you go and Google, look at that fabulous photograph, if you Google help InDesign ePub, it will actually take you to our help pages, and you will see some of these documents where it lists in great detail every single change we've made between InDesign CS6 and the latest version of InDesign CC. And I say that because if you are involved in the day-to-day creation of ePub, there's a lot of under-the-hood changes which you won't read in any marketing documents, which are extremely valuable. For example, it describes in great detail what we now do in the bullets and numbering case. It now explains in great detail what we do with nested styles. So a very useful and highly technical document. And if you like, I probably actually have it on my laptop here, so if anyone wants a copy of those, please do come see me afterwards, and we'll find some magic way of getting it to you. There are many other resources, and we have friends and partners at lynda.com who do some excellent presentations on our ePub capabilities, but also a very handy place to go if you want to learn the first bits of information about InDesign is Adobe TV, where there's a number of free videos and a very useful place to go see some of the high-level pieces of information about InDesign and its ePub export. Do you know, coming to these events is really tricky for me because I work very closely. I say I work very close with the InDesign team. I work with the InDesign team because I drive the InDesign team, and I know exactly what they're working on. So I know lots of things I can't tell you, but luckily, you won't have to wait that long before you learn a little bit more about what InDesign is going to be offering in the next version of the product, because on June the 18th, we will be announcing the 2014 release of the Creative Cloud. And it may or may not be the case that InDesign has an update. I can't possibly tell you, otherwise our marketing department would kill me. They really would kill me, so I can't tell you. However, what I can do is I can talk hypothetically about some of the things that we care about and some of the things that we might have been thinking about for the last number of months. We've talked about InDesign's capability for creating reflowable ePub. And creating reflowable ePub from InDesign has always been glass half full. People want to make reflowable ePubs. They're extremely valuable, and we think many people are very happy with that process. However, at InDesign's heart, it's a beautiful page layout application. People communicating the most wonderful images, ideas, and stories. And I was lucky enough to spend an hour wandering around and looking at all the fabulous books, most of which have been created inside InDesign. At some point, we would like to be able to offer that beautiful layout in an ePub wrapper. That's something we would really love to do in the future. There are many other things we would love to do. We would like to do more around accessibility. We'd like to do more around improving our basic capabilities. So while I certainly couldn't suggest what's in future versions of InDesign, these are the things that we'll be focused on, and I'm looking forward to coming back in a year's time and talking more about how InDesign has significantly improved its ePub capabilities and its ability to take beautiful designs, beautiful ideas, and help the storytelling. And at that point, and probably having gone way over time, because that's a skill I bring with me, is it way over time or just a bit over time? A bit over time. If anyone has any questions, I would be delighted to answer them. We have a question. Oh, I think there's a microphone coming. Otherwise, we have to play the game of can you speak up or write it down on a bit of paper and pass it to the front?
Is Adobe making any plans to roll out an in-browser reader similar to how you can read a PDF in Firefox or Chrome for ePub? And if not, why not? I mean, that's something I've been wondering for a while.
Wow. I don't think I've got much room to go there. At this point, we don't have something like that. We have a technology called digital editions, which has not had as much love as perhaps it might have deserved in the last year or two. Actually, it was announced recently that we will be updating the digital editions and the Adobe technology behind it. We don't have a browser solution, but it's interesting as we walk around here. I mean, one of the benefits of me coming to these shows, it's not just to present, that's a spin-off. It's actually to hear what's going on, and it's fascinating to hear. A year ago, people were talking about reading systems that were in an app. And this year, the big difference that I've heard is about people saying, can we just release it? Look, this is great technology. Some people want it in an app. Some people want it in a store. Some people want it in a browser. So it's a very interesting idea. And if you've got some particular ideas about how you'd want it to be, please come talk to me afterwards, because it's a fascinating idea. We can do the clever bits of creating an interesting looking ePub. Maybe we can do a bit more to help you actually get that ePub to where you want it to go and display it in the way you might want to get it to go. So we don't have one, and I don't have a good reason as to why not, but it's a fascinating idea.
You mentioned the ePub 3 export capabilities for reflowable ePub 3. Are you doing anything with fixed layout ePub 3?
Sorry, what's fixed layout ePub 3? I'm teasing. I think it's the inevitable future of InDesign to take beautiful layouts and to be able people to export them to a fixed layout world. It's not something we have right now, but it's a very, sorry, this is going to sound terrible, it's fascinating. We would love to do something like that. If you would like to come talk to me afterwards, I would love to learn more about why you might need it, and maybe we can talk a bit more. I'm sorry, rubbish answers. I should just go I cannot comment on that. It's much more interesting that way. Any more questions? Ladies and gentlemen, you've been a fabulous audience. Frankly, I was surprised anyone turned up at a 4:45 on a Thursday. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, we'd like to answer them. Thank you very much.